Hello and welcome. You have found a quiet place and a little time. And that is enough. If it helps, let your eyes rest closed, or let your gaze soften on something still in the room. Nothing here needs your hurry. Take a slow breath in, if that feels easy. Let the breath leave you without effort, like smoke leaving a chimney when the wind is kind. As you breathe out, let your shoulders soften. You do not have to hold them. Let the weight of the day ease away from your neck, down along your arms, until your hands rest as they are, unclenched, unneeded for a little while. Another breath, if you like. The space between one breath and the next does not ask anything of you. Tonight we travel only in imagination toward a day that moves at the pace of weather and animals, toward a life built from field and fire, from bread and butter, from small rooms that knew how to hold a family without shouting. We are not rushing through a lesson. We are settling into a rhythm older than clocks, the way you are settling into rest now, breath by breath, shoulder by shoulder. Picture morning first, because old Ireland loved mornings even when they were grey. Imagine mist lying low over a lane, not threatening, only soft, as if the world had been wrapped in wool while it slept. Imagine a cottage with a roof that slopes the way shoulders slope, when they are tired and honest. Not perfect, but sheltering. Smoke might rise thin from a chimney, not because drama waits inside, but because someone has coaxed embers back into kindness, because heat is a daily negotiation between yesterday's ash and today's need. If your mind begins to name tasks or replay conversations, you need not push those thoughts away. Notice them the way you might notice a blackbird on a hedge, then return your attention to the mist, to the breath, to the slack in your shoulders, and the quiet weight of your body where it rests. Take another slow breath, and with the exhale, imagine your shoulders dropping a fraction more, as if someone kind had placed warm hands there and said, "Without words, you may rest now." The place where your shoulder meets your arm is a small junction that often carries tension without announcement. You do not have to fix it. Breathe toward it, the way you might breathe warmth into cold hands and let the muscles answer in their own time. A day in old Ireland was not one story repeated everywhere. Counties differed, soil differed, fortune differed. Still, there are threads you can follow without straining. The cow that must be milked, the field that must be walked, the fire that must be fed, the bread that must be earned by hands that knew the feel of flour. Tonight, those threads are not a test for you. They are a path you walk in thought, slowly, without needing to arrive anywhere sharp or certain. Imagine the air cool against your cheek and your mind, the way morning can feel like a clean page even when the work list is long. Imagine boots by a door, if boots there were, or bare earth packed smooth near a threshold. Imagine the sound of a latch lifted gently, not because someone is afraid, but because sound carries differently when the day is still young and the world has not yet raised its voice. You are not here to prove your strength. You are here to drift through ordinary goodness. The goodness of a bowl, of a blanket, of a window square that holds light the way a hand holds water, imperfectly, lovingly. Listen, if you can, for the smaller sounds that made a day feel whole. The scrape of a stool across packed earth, the soft complaint of a kettle finding its place on a hook, the rustle of oat straw in a mattress when someone turns in sleep and does not quite wake. These were not interruptions, they were punctuation in a language spoken slowly, syllable by syllable, season by season. Imagine water carried in a vessel that fits the crook of an arm, not because the story needs hardship, but because water has always insisted on being met halfway. Imagine the taste of it cold from a spring. Metal faint if the cup was tin, clay round if the cup was older than fashion. Imagine hands that knew cold water in winter and did not make a drama of it, because drama was a luxury the fields did not always pay for. You do not have to feel the cold yourself. You can admire from a distance the steadiness of people who learned to warm one another in other ways, with tea, with cloth, with the simple fact of continuing. Think of the table, if a table there was, scrubbed until grain showed honest, not because cleanliness was a performance for strangers, but because crumbs attract what you do not want near sleep, and because a clean surface makes room for bread without crowding the mind. Bread in this imagination is not a metaphor for everything. It is bread, flour and patience, a crust that resists a little then yields, an inside that steams when broken and smells like comfort without asking to be praised. Think of the doorframe measured by generations of shoulders brushing past, each touch wearing wood a little smoother until the wood felt almost polite. Think of the threshold as a small teacher. Lift your feet, it suggested, not because you are weak, but because respect for a house begins at the place where outside becomes inside, where weather is asked to wait. When you imagine the horizon, let it be near enough that your thoughts do not have to travel far. Let there be a field green in one stripe and brown in another, not as conflict, but as rotation, as rest for soil, as patience made visible. Let there be a hedge that has thickened until it feels like a wall made of patience rather than stone. Let there be a path worn in the middle by feet that belong to people whose names we will not need tonight. Names can rest, feet can rest. Your own feet can feel supported where they are, whether you are lying down or sitting, whether the room around you is modern or a memory. The night deepens by degrees too small to count one by one. You might not notice until the sky feels closer, softer, more like a blanket lowered than a door shut tight. That is the kind of darkness that helps sleep, not the kind that startles. You are allowed to trust it a little. Let your jaw unclench if it has held the day there. Let your tongue rest softly. Let your eyes, if they are closed, feel heavy as stones warmed by afternoon sun. No effort, no watching, only permission to drift. We are nearly at the kind of arrival that needs no gate. A day in old Ireland begins, not with a trumpet, but with breath, with light finding the edge of a shutter, with a body rising because the animals are waiting, because the world has kept its ancient promise. Morning returns, whether we are ready or not. You can be ready in the softest way, the way you are ready now, listening, resting, willing to follow a story that will not hurry you. Rest here a moment on the imagined threshold, wherever your mind has placed you. Feel the earth steady beneath you. Feel your breath steady within you. When you are ready, the day will unfold. Not to excite you, but to accompany you. The way still air accompanies a candle flame, holding its shape without breaking it. You might notice, without forcing it, the space between your ribs widening slightly on the inhale, softening on the exhale. That rhythm is older than any story about harvests. You can borrow it, the way you might borrow a blanket. Fold it around you, feel its weight. Let it be enough without asking where the wool was spun. If worry taps at the edge of your mind, treat it like a bird at a window. Acknowledge it with kindness, then let the glass remain between you and its hurry. This day in old Ireland will still be here when you return your attention. It is not a test you can fail. It is whether you walk through in thought, coat optional, boots optional, judgment optional. And now, with your shoulders a little softer than they were when you began, we can let the morning widen, not with alarm, but with the patient light that finds every cottage eventually, whether the sky is generous or grey. Light comes first as colour before it comes as strength. A grey that is not sadness, a silver that is not metal, a promise that the sun exists even when clouds have borrowed the whole sky. In a cottage where night still lingers in corners, someone moves toward the hearth, because fire is a kind of heartbeat. Ash is sifted, embers are coaxed, kindling is placed with a patience that looks like reverence, but is really habit learned from cold mornings. The smell of smoke in imagination is not disaster. It is breakfast being born. It is turf and timber doing what they have always done, surrendering slowly to heat, teaching the room that warmth is possible again. If there is porridge, it is simple. Grain and water and time, stirred until the spoon leaves a trail that closes gently, the way a lane closes behind a walker who is not afraid of being followed by quiet. Outside, if outside is where your mind walks next, the yard holds chores arranged like notes in a tune you do not have to read. A bucket rings softly against stone. A door creaks because wood lives, because hinges remember every opening. Chickens, if chickens there are, speak in small sounds that belong to morning the way dew belongs to grass, without argument. Milking, in the soft telling, is rhythm. The hand learns a cadence. The animal learns trust. The milk comes white and steady, a quiet miracle repeated daily until it becomes a kind of prayer without words. You do not need to see every detail. You can feel the steadiness of it. The way steadiness can soothe a mind that likes to race. The field waits the way fields always wait. Not impatient, not kind, simply there. A plough turns earth because someone decided that what lies beneath the grass might feed more than what lies above it, at least for a season. Soil lifts and falls, dark as tea, smelling of old leaves and deep time. The ploughman's shoulders work, but we will not make a contest of strength tonight. We will notice instead the partnership between muscle and morning, between tool and land, between the wish to eat and the willingness to dig. If sheep appear in your imagination, let them be clouds with hooves, moving as a thought moves when it is not rushed, pausing, grazing, lifting heads to study nothing in particular. A dog might circle them not as a tyrant, but as a habit learned from generations who believed that gentleness could guide as well as shouting. Sometimes better. A shepherd's crook is a curve that suggests direction without insisting on pain. You can watch from far off, your own shoulders soft, your hands empty of urgency. Haymaking, when the season turns toward it, is sun and scratch, and the sweet dust of grass cured into winter's insurance. Scythes swing in arcs that respect the spine if the spine respects the arc. Stacks rise in fields like green thoughts, saved for later, tied with twine that frays in its own time. None of this needs to be your labor tonight. You are only watching the idea of labor. The way you might watch waves, steady, repeated, older than opinion. Fences in old Ireland might be stone, might be ditch and bank, might be hedge, allowed to thicken until it became a living wall. Boundaries were serious, not because people loved walls for themselves, but because animals and crops are poems that do not rhyme when mixed carelessly. A gate that swings on a hinge is a small kindness. It says, you may pass and you may return, and the day will not punish you for needing both. Seed follows, or potatoes are tucked into ridges with a care that looks like tucking children into blankets. The earth receives. Rain will visit when it visits. Sun will visit when it visits. People in old Ireland knew weather as a neighbour, sometimes generous, sometimes reserved, rarely rude on purpose. They spoke about it the way you speak about a relative who cannot be controlled, but can be understood a little better. Each year, if you see a cart in the lane, let it move at the speed of wheels, that know ruts, not at the speed of thought. Let the horse's breath be visible in cold air, a small cloud that belongs to a creature that does not hurry its own heart. Let the driver sit with a hand relaxed on the reins. because trust between species is also a kind of farming. It grows when fed with patience. Water in ditches reflects sky in a way that calms the mind, broken silver, moving slowly, carrying leaf and story toward a stream that remembers hills. Frogs might speak in the evening, but morning belongs to the wren, to the robin, to the quiet persistence of sparrows. Birds do not need your analysis, they need only your attention, briefly. And then they forgive you for forgetting. As you will forgive yourself for forgetting the breath for a moment, and then returning to it. By midday, hunger returns as naturally as light. Food is not spectacle, it is repair. Bread might be soda bread, quick and honest, or a loaf from an oven that remembered yesterday's heat. Butter might be yellow with grass, cheese might be simple, eggs might be boiled in water that knew salt the way a sea knows salt. Distant cousin. There is tea later perhaps, or nettle, or whatever the hedge offered when medicine was needed and doctors were far. If bacon appears in your imagination, let it be rationed by thrift rather than by shame. A little fat can carry flavour through a pot of potatoes the way a story carries meaning through a long evening. Salt itself was sometimes precious enough to be kept, where hands would not waste it. You do not need to inventory every pantry. You can trust that hunger, when met honestly, becomes a kind of quiet satisfaction that does not need to announce itself. Apples in autumn might lie in straw, each one a small planet with a stem like a pole. Berries in summer might stain fingers. Children might learn colour through taste before they learn it through books. Honey, again, is worth mentioning twice, because sweetness was not constant. It was a visit, a reward, a memory of blossom stored in wax and patience. Meals might be eaten in silence or in talk, depending on the house. Either way, the table was a small democracy. Everyone had a place, even if places were not equal in every sense humans measure. For sleep, equality is simpler. Each person gets breath. Each person gets the chance to rest when work releases them. Work pauses because bodies ask for pause, not because clocks command it. Someone sits on a stool that fits the body the way a shoreline fits the tide. Imperfectly, faithfully. A child might be near, not as noise, but as presence. Learning without knowing. It is learning that life is made of small tasks repeated until they become love. A woman might card wool while a kettle murmurs. A man might sharpen a blade with care that looks like tenderness because a dull tool asks for force, and force costs the body more than time. These divisions are not rules. They are breezes that sometimes blew one way in one house and another way in another. What matters for sleep is not accuracy of role, but accuracy of kindness. People feeding what needed feeding, mending what needed mending, speaking when speech helped and silence when silence did. The garden, if there is a garden, is not a magazine. It is a negotiation with soil. Cabbages that refuse to hurry, herbs that taste sharper if you respect their seasons, flowers that some might call weeds until they learn the names. To kneel is not defeat. It is a posture that brings the face closer to the smell of earth, which is the smell of continuity, of rot and promise braided together. Bees, if bees are near, stitch the air between blossoms. They do not need your gratitude, but you can offer it anyway, silently, the way you offer gratitude to breath. Honey, when it arrives on bread, is not a lecture about economics. It is sweetness that took time, and time is the one currency old days spent without counting every minute. The afternoon waits in the distance like a hill you do not have to climb quickly. You can stay here in the morning a little longer if you like. The breath you take can be the same breath as the person in the field. Slow in, slow out, shoulders soft, hands unclenched. Nothing in this day needs you to prove you belong to it. You belong simply by listening. When the sun is high, or when the clouds brighten enough to pretend, shadows shorten, and the world feels smaller in a comforting way, not trapped, but held. A lane may lead toward a village that is not a city, not a roar, but a cluster of needs met kindly, a forge where iron learns patience, a well where ropes know the taste of water, a shop that might be a window and a counter, and a person who remembers your name. Trade in old Ireland was often a conversation as much as a transaction. Credit could live in a notebook and in memory. Trust could be a coin that never rang. You do not need to follow every bargain tonight. It is enough to feel the pace of people who knew one another beyond screens, beyond speed, in the slower grammar of repeated encounters. Perhaps the village has a fair day remembered in a month, not a spectacle, but as a rearrangement of ordinary life. Extra feet on the street, extra voices. A fiddler who does not play for fame, but for the pleasure of fingers remembering what ears forgot they needed. Perhaps there is no fair today. Perhaps there is only a post office's quiet window, a priest's nod, a teacher's chalkboard that holds letters for children who will one day write letters of their own. The day does not require you to name every building. It asks only that you walk through it without rushing. Perhaps someone walks home with a paper twist of sugar with thread, with a repaired tool that fits the hand better than it did before. Perhaps someone pauses at a gate to talk, not because time is wasted, but because time is shared, and sharing time was sometimes the most honest wealth a day could offer. If church bells are within range of hearing, let them mark time without scolding. Let them be reminders that communities invent rhythms so individuals do not have to invent every rhythm alone. If you do not wish for bells, you can have silence instead. The same silence that holds a field when wind pauses. A silence that is not empty but full of small listening. Roads, where they existed, were often honest about mud. Boots carried evidence home. That was not failure, that was evidence of travel. If you imagine mud in this story, imagine it as a weight that can be scraped off at a threshold, not as a stain that marks a person forever. Old Ireland had shame, like any human place, but sleep stories do not need to sharpen shame for effect. They can offer forgiveness in the form of a cloth, a bucket, a laugh that is soft and not at anyone's expense. Animals return in stories as creatures that must be moved, fed, sheltered. A dog might lie where dust and sun agree, watching without judgment. A cat might claim warmth because cats understand real estate at the level of hearthstones. Geese might comment from a pond, their voice is blunt and funny if you listen with a soft ear. Though we will not turn this into comedy, we will let their voices be texture, part of the afternoon's fabric. Work changes shape as light leans west. Fields release people back to yards. Hands are washed in water that may be cold and clear, pumped or carried, precious enough to respect. Faces feel the day on them. Wind, sun, the faint ache of effort that is not suffering, but the body's honest accounting. Inside again, the cottage gathers its people. Shoes shift near the door. Cloaks hang on pegs that know the weight of wool. The room remembers how to hold voices low, how to keep heat from rushing up the chimney too eagerly, how to make a small space feel like enough. Lamps, if lamps there were, might be oil and wick, trimmed with a care that feels like tenderness because light in winter is not abstract. It is survival of mood, if not always survival of body. Shadows become companions rather than threats when the flame is steady. If your mind prefers candle, let candle be enough. If your mind prefers darkness, let darkness be the kind that rests behind eyelids, not the kind that asks questions with sharp edges. Supper is not a feast unless it is a feast day, and even then the feast might be modest by modern measure. rich by the measure of hunger honestly met. Potatoes might sit in their jackets like small warm stones. Fish might arrive from a coast you cannot see but can trust. Soup might marry whatever the garden offered. Carrot, onion, herbs whose names are older than fashion. Firelight, when evening comes, is where the day becomes story. Flames do not hurry. They eat what they are given and give back light in exchange. A fair trade repeated until it feels like philosophy. Faces near a fire look gentler because contrast softens edges, because shadows forgive what daylight sometimes sharpens. Stories told in such light do not need villains every night. Sometimes they need only a lake, a boat, a harp-string vibrating in a way that makes the heart feel visited. Sometimes they need only a journey that ends at home, because home was the miracle all along. You can listen as you are listening now, loosely without memorizing, letting images arrive and depart. Someone might mend, someone might pray in a voice barely above breath. Someone might sing without performance, because song was once a tool like a spoon, ordinary, useful, capable of sweetness without insisting on applause. You can listen without catching every word. You can let the melody be a path your mind walks without shoes. Children might be sent toward bed, not as punishment, but as punctuation. The old might sit a little longer because age earns the right to slower endings. The middle might bank the fire, bar the door without drama. Test the latch the way you test sleep. Not forcing, only checking that the night can be trusted a little longer. Before sleep, there might be a candle's small parliament, one flame deciding how much darkness is allowed to remain. Shadows jump gently, then settle. A story might be told in a voice that does not need to reach the back row, because there is no back row. Only family, only neighbors, only the night's permission to speak softly. If you imagine prayer, let it be simple as water. Gratitude without performance, hope without bargaining. If you imagine no prayer, let there be only the quiet agreement that the house has held the day, and the day has released the house, and the breath can slow. The stars, if they are visible, are not a checklist. They are punctuation in a language too large to translate. You can feel small beneath them without feeling crushed. Smallness can be a comfort when the world has asked you to be large for too long. Night in old Ireland was not empty. It had its own chores. Listening for fox, for weather, for a cow that shifts in the byre as cows do. Thinking in slow muscle. It had its own comforts. Blankets that smelled of wool and air. A mattress that knew the shape of the person it carried. A silence that was not loneliness, but rest. Rain on thatches, a percussion section for gentle minds. Not a storm, but a steady teaching that roofs can hold, that water can slide away, that dry waits on the other side of listening. Wind in the chimney can sound like a voice, but you need not translate it. You can let it be sound without meaning, the way waves are sound without argument. If fear visited, it visited quietly in many houses, because life was not always gentle, and honesty matters even in sleep stories. Yet tonight we do not rehearse hardship for its own sake. We acknowledge that darkness held unknowns, then we return to breath, to shoulder, to the fact that morning has kept its promise often enough that bodies learn to sleep anyway, trusting the round of days. Somewhere in the night an animal settles. Somewhere a child turns in sleep and does not wake. Somewhere an old clock ticks, if a clock there is, or no clock ticks, and time becomes only the pulse in the ear, the breath in the throat, the slow tide of blood doing its quiet work without asking for applause. The field you left behind in thought is still there, darkened, dew returning where sun had been. The cottage you imagined is still standing in history, though its exact stones may belong to many places at once. Nothing in that picture needs you to save it. It needs only to become soft in your memory. The way a blanket becomes soft through use, through trust, through repeated kindness. Let your hips sink a little heavier into whatever supports you. Let your face muscles slacken, not in sadness, but in release. Let your next inhale arrive without your planning it, and your next exhale leave without your naming it. Sleep is not a performance. It is a return. Imagine your own breath as a small fire you tend without effort. Inhale, and the ribs widen a little. Exhale, and the belly softens. There is no task in this except permission. The day you walked in, imagination has completed itself without needing your perfection. The field does not ask for your score. The hearth does not ask for your resume. The lane does not measure your pace. Let your shoulders widen and loosen, as if someone kind had placed warm hands there again and said, without words, you may rest now. Let your jaw release. Let your tongue rest. Let your thoughts become like embers, glowing without sharpness, fading when they need to fade. If memories rise, let them rise like mist. Let them drift, let them thin. If tomorrow lists itself in your mind, you can set the list down on an imaginary table by the door. It will wait. Night is not a place for sharpening plans. The cottage in your mind can grow smaller until it is only warmth, only the sound of breath, only the faintest smell of smoke. That means safety rather than sorrow. The land beyond can flatten into darkness without threat, a landscape generous enough to hold sleep, the way earth holds seed, quietly, confidently, without needing to witness the moment roots decide to believe. You might feel, as you drift, the echo of the day's tasks. The hand that stirred porridge, the foot that crossed a threshold, the eyes that watched the horizon. Let each echo become softer than the one before, until the only motion left is breathing. And even that can grow shallow enough to be forgotten, then remembered, then forgotten again. You have traveled through a day without lifting a tool, without lifting a more than attention, and that is enough work for tonight. Ireland's old days were made of such small courage, showing up, feeding what needed feeding, resting when rest was possible, beginning again when light returned. If you need permission, let this be permission. To stop holding the story tightly, let it slip. Let your mind wander into nonsense, into images that do not connect, into the gentle absurdity of dreams that owe nothing to history. The past you visited is not here to test you. It is here to leave you softer than it found you. Rest now in whatever darkness you have. Let the story dissolve into temperature and breath. Let the words become fewer until there are none. Only the gentle fact of you. Here, allowed to fall asleep. Good night. Rest well.